Welcome to School and Around, a podcast hosted by Branching Minds, featuring prominent leaders, subject matter experts, and thought innovators with their perspectives on the current challenges facing K-12 education. I am your host, Larissa Napolitan, a former teacher, instructional coach, and a member of the Branching Minds team, here to lead conversations and to shine a light on phenomenal educators and those that are on a mission to transform our schools and the lives of students. Maybe you've been listening for a while, or this is your first episode. If you like what you hear, would you do us a favor by rating and reviewing us on iTunes? This is a fantastic way to tell us you enjoy what we are creating. Also, if you want more MTSS resources, sign up for our weekly newsletter using the link in our show notes, and check out our website for all the blogs and guides you would ever need about MTSS. As a teacher, when dealing with behavior, it wasn't just about what happened in the moment and kind of dealing with it with the student, but about whether I documented it for my administrators to see. I couldn't just talk about a student being disruptive in class, but I had to make sure to record it. And sometimes it felt like the documentation was more important than actually helping the student learn from the situation. So today I am excited to talk about behavior documentation with one of our favorite guests here at School and Around, Trudy Bender. And if you didn't know, Trudy is a school psychologist and our senior manager of thought leadership content here at Branching Minds. Welcome back, Trudy.
Thank you. It's so good to be back on Schooling Around.
So I'm going to just start out by asking, what are we getting wrong about behavior documentation in schools? And why do you think many teachers feel like it's a waste of time?
Oh, I think your intro just captured it perfectly. I think teachers feel so frustrated when they take the time to actually write something down to turn it in. And then, either they don't know what happens after they write the referral, or they do know what happens and they're not happy about it, but they're just not seeing any connection between all of that documentation that they're expected to provide and then what's actually happening with the student. So, and I think a lot of teachers may not realize too that a discipline referral is a legal document. So we need to be really, really factual to put as much factual detail as possible into discipline incidents.
The way I chose to go about it as a teacher was I would take language from our student handbook and I would use that specific language in the referral of the student refused my reasonable request to blank. And that helped me a lot because if I tried to write the referral right after the moment it happened, I was too emotional or too heightened. Like if it was kind of a tense situation, I had to give myself a moment.
Right. And we have to remember as educators, we're people as well. And a lot of those discipline incidents are really frustrating. They kind of hit at the heart of a teacher when you have incidents like that, because you feel like this shouldn't be happening. Like if I were in control of my classroom, this wouldn't be happening. And maybe there are things that you could do that would be better. But I would say, especially nowadays, behavior incidents are going to happen, and it can be hard not to take it personally, to feel like it's having an impact on your career. So there's just so much wrapped up into it. It's not just a simple matter of, kind of writing down what happened and going about your day. I appreciate what you said about trying to take a step back, giving yourself a moment to breathe and get that more objective lens before you start writing down.
So I want to get into, do you think that traditional behavior documentation is actually contributing to better student outcomes, or is it just about compliance?
Well, a lot of times it is about compliance. Let's just be honest. And I think teachers today understandably feel like they are just asked to document every blessed thing that happens, everything that they do. So even if the documentation is really good, here's a whole nother factor to consider, which is you may not have the tools that you need to pull all of that data together and make meaningful decisions based on it. I mean, in my experience, we often had tons and tons of discipline data, but it was not accessible to us, like to come back to us in a way that could actually inform decision making. And so there are ways and there are tools that can help you take all of that discipline data and actually make some good use out of it. And once you see that connection between the data that I've provided and the intervention that can happen, and not just the intervention, but also the consequence, like a good discipline documentation piece, a good referral system can help inform interventions, but also consequences. I mean, you've probably heard stories, and I've seen it myself, where a child who's skipping school or not attending school is suspended from school. it's highly unlikely that this is going to be perceived as a punishment by the student. Could it be that this student is actually trying to get out of a subject where they feel embarrassed, or they just don't want to work, they don't want to apply themselves here, or it feels uncomfortable to them for some reason. And if the consequence is getting out even more from that situation, they're just going to continue that behavior, right? That's the whole idea behind function of behavior. And so if we're really intentional in our documentation about noting where and when and who and what happened right before and what happened right after in the environment, so that you can start digging and say, all right, we're starting to see some patterns here. Now let's think about the way we're responding within our code of conduct. Of course, we're going to have consequences for discipline incidents, but let's look within our code of conduct and see what are the consequences that might actually make the behavior less likely to occur, along with what are the interventions that we could provide that might address this underlying need that the student has, this skill deficit or this need, whatever it might be.
Yeah. I think that that's like the missing piece, because often as a classroom teacher, I might be documenting that the student is late to class, and another teacher might be documenting that they left class early at this, and sometimes I'm only seeing the picture of just my moment in time with this student, because I just think that, like, if we're doing this all in standalone in silos, it's harder to do that work. It's really harder to move that needle for those students who are in for a group of students.
Especially at the secondary level. You are a secondary teacher, so you're seeing so many kids and don't have that collaboration time all the time to really pull together with your team and take a look. Like you need tools that help you dig down and see what's really going on with a particular student.
Yeah. I mean, I could probably give you countless of stories.
Yeah, and it's not just seeing the behavioral data. It's being able to see how the student is performing academically as well. I mean, one thing that we are talking a lot about right now is early warning systems. This idea that you're pulling together these different risk factors. Is the student coming to school? What's the attendance look like? What's their course performance? And what is their behavior? And then when we have all of these pieces pulled together, we can start to dig down and see what might be going on with the student. And our behavior documentation is so important to that. Part of this, too, is so much of it comes down to district and school administration and the way that they organize this. Like, teachers need really clear parameters for this is the level of behavior where you need to start documenting. Even if you're not sending a kid to the office, you still need to be keeping that trail of breadcrumbs that says, I'm seeing this behavior. Almost no office referral should come out of nowhere. Usually there's a whole buildup of behaviors
Yeah.
that are going on. And it doesn't matter how experienced you are, you're going to have kids who have these behaviors. Maybe you're managing it really well. Maybe you're requesting help. Regardless of that, you need to be documenting what's actually happening with the student and your response to it, and having a really clear levels of misbehavior chart with code of conduct and
Mhm.
clear, parameters for what consequences go with what kind or level of behavior, along with a standard treatment protocol. If you're seeing these kinds of, minor behaviors going on in your classroom, here are the ways that we respond as a campus. We are going to provide you plenty of tools for doing that, making
Mhm.
sure that it's organized. Once it gets beyond tier one, and this is, I'll get on my soapbox here. You probably heard me say this before, but once it gets beyond that level, you really need a more campus-wide, campus organized response. It can't fall to individual teachers. So individual
Yeah.
teachers have a role to play, certainly, and accurately documenting what's going on in that response is so important to that.
Well, what you talked about made me think of a couple things. First of all, like, I know at one point in different schools I worked in, we had like behavior flow charts, right? If this happens, then, like you talked about the tier one options of like major and minor, like we always talked about the major and minor offenses, and doing training around that, because I do think, even, I did a lot of work with new teachers, and in their mind, this might be a major behavior, being super disrespectful, or different moments like that. And so really talking through as a staff and as a school and even as a district of like, what are the major and minors, how do we do that standard treatment protocol, like you
Mhm.
mentioned, because that is so helpful. That clarity is so helpful as a teacher. Some of it's basic classroom management, but some of it is how do you respond to certain types of behaviors,
Mhm.
in a way that is helpful for the student and helpful for you to like be able to manage class, and then also deal with certain levels of behavior.
That's right. Yeah, I think having a nice um, rubric or flow that lets you know, like, here's a menu of options. Here are some things that you can do as a teacher right off the bat. You don't need permission to do this. You can do it on your own. And some really effective interventions that these are not hard to implement or to do. And you often think, well, it won't work. If it's that simple, it won't work. But many times, those, if you catch it super early, you can make such a difference as a teacher. And you should absolutely document those minor behaviors if they kind of hit that threshold for your campus. So my
Hmm.
goal was always documentation in like 1 to 2 minutes, absolutely no more than that. And in my district where I was serving, we had branching minds. So we were able to do that. We were able to implement those kinds of really easy ways to document your discipline and your intervention um, in a way that was not, it was not super time consuming. And you could really see the results because all of your data was pulled together in one platform. And so you could see the
Yeah.
results. And I think that really makes a big difference for teachers.
It's empowering as a teacher if you know what you can and can't do, what you have available, what support you have. So I want to kind of switch gears and talk a little bit about, you know, because the idea of documentation is really, a lot of people think it's about compliance. So why do you think that there's that resistance to changing how and why we track behavior in schools? And maybe what would it take to shift some of those mindsets?
Well, here's a really practical thing. Don't ask teachers to do things twice. Make it as simple and clear a process as absolutely possible. And then make sure that they can see the connection between the data they've provided, the information that they've provided, and the outcome. I mean, that's really it. Teachers want to provide the information that's needed in order for students to get the help that they need and to get the consequences that they need. Like, teachers want to do that, but if they don't see any connection between all of the work that they're doing and what's actually happening on the ground, they're going to be very resistant to it. So I think being able to take the data that's been collected and put it in a format and share it back with teachers as a group, not about individual students, but to help teachers realize that well-written behavior referrals that are pulling into a data system that's actually designed to help you solve problems will make their campus a better place to teach and to learn. And so sharing your discipline outcomes at your faculty meetings, for example, to say, all right, here's where we are this year to date compared to last year to date. Here's what's going on. We're doing better in these areas. We're doing worse in these areas. Like just bringing it out into the open and also being open to feedback from your teachers, you will get it. And a lot of teachers are very frustrated about this very topic. And you see teachers and administrators kind of butting heads because teachers are
Mhm.
expecting this response. Administrators may feel like their hands are tied or they're overwhelmed. And so opening those lines of communication and really working together, make sure you have teacher voice on your discipline committees, the folks that are making decisions about what these protocols are and how the data is collected. Because as you've often said, Larissa, like once you're out of the classroom for a few years, it's hard to remember and conceptualize just how much is asked of our teachers today.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that resistance often comes out of a real place that
Mhm.
of frustration
Yes.
of like wanting it to be better, wanting it to, ask any teacher and they just are like, I just want to be able to teach my class. And so when there's obstacles in the way of that, of whether it's behavior, like making it harder to deal with that obstacle
Mhm.
is actually going to like make the problem so much worse.
Does. It does. And I would really recommend as well getting some good anonymous survey feedback. If you can get a large enough, get all of your teachers to participate in that, to see what they really think about the systems that you have in place for documenting behavior. And if you have whole
Mhm.
cohorts of teachers who are saying it's not worth it to document the behavior that's going on, I'm just going to ignore it, or I'm just going to let this go on, even though there's not a lot of learning taking place, or I just don't want to mess with this. You're not getting an accurate picture of really what's going on for those teachers. And I think too, your teachers are at risk of dropping out from the profession, right? Of saying, I don't want to work here anymore because behavior has become such an issue. You want that open line of communication. And to me,
Mhm.
the ideal is where you're both getting the data and the intervention support for your students that you need, and teachers say that we're feeling supported. You never want discipline incidents to be going down just because people are no longer reporting them because they've given up. That's
Yeah.
not what you want. You want them
Yeah.
to be reporting accurately on what's happening.
I've had those years where teachers really feel unsupported, and that kind of environment that just eats away at the morale of the staff,
Mhm.
because if teachers are not feeling supported, and then that collective efficacy that we know that has the biggest effect size also goes down. And so I really appreciate what you have to say about sort of the motivation behind documentation. Really, I love that your take on it, and we just hope that we can help continue to provide resources for leaders and educators to do the work to support staff and support students. And so,
Yeah.
thanks for
Thank you
being
so
here.
much. This was a fun conversation. Thanks, Larissa.
Thanks for listening to Schoolin' Around, a podcast hosted by Branching Minds. Go ahead and subscribe to our feed wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget, if you are enjoying our content, would you do us a favor and rate and review our podcast on iTunes? This helps others find our podcast and lets us know how much you love what we're creating. Branching Minds is an educational technology company using learning sciences and technology to help districts effectively personalize learning through MTSS. To learn more about us, check out our website, branchingminds.com, or follow us on Twitter, Facebook, or LinkedIn at Branching Minds.